There's a moment that comes for every man who's serious about building something real, and it doesn't announce itself with a warning. One day you look around and the people who used to be right there with you, cheering, checking in, matching your energy, just aren't anymore. Not because they abandoned you in some dramatic way. They simply stopped showing up in the intensity you needed, because they never needed what you're now demanding of yourself. And in that silence, you're left with a question most men spend their whole lives avoiding. Are you going to keep waiting for someone to carry this with you? Or are you finally going to accept that this exact thing you're building was never anyone's job but yours? Let's be honest about something most people won't say out loud. You've been waiting for someone to believe in you the way you need to be believed in before you fully commit. Waiting for the right partner, the right team, the right support system to appear before you give this everything you have. And that waiting has felt reasonable, even wise, because we're taught that no one succeeds alone, that community matters, that we need each other. All of that is true. But somewhere along the way, that truth became a hiding place. You turned "I need support" into "I can't start until I have it." And those are not the same sentence. One is a fact about how humans function. The other is an excuse dressed up as self-awareness. Here's the truth that's going to sting. Nobody is coming to save this for you. Not because people don't care, but because they can't. Nobody can want your goal as badly as you need to want it. Nobody can do your reps, write your pages, make your calls, sit with your doubt at 11 at night, when everything in you wants to quit. That work, the actual work, was always going to be yours alone, no matter how many people stood beside you cheering. You just didn't want to accept that yet, because accepting it means there's no one left to blame, and no one left to lean on when it gets hard. It means the whole weight of this comes back to you, every single time. And I want you to sit with something uncomfortable for a second. A part of you has been relieved every time this depended on someone else, because it gave you an out. If they didn't show up, if the partnership fell through, if nobody believed in the vision the way you did, you got to feel disappointed instead of exposed. Disappointment is safe. It lets you stay the person who was let down by others. Exposure is different. Exposure is standing completely alone in front of your own goal, with no one else to point to, knowing that if it doesn't happen now, there's exactly one person responsible. That's terrifying. It's also the only place real building actually happens. Think about every person you've ever admired for what they built. Somewhere in their story, whether they talk about it or not, there was a stretch, sometimes years long, where it was just them. No team yet, no recognition yet, no proof yet that any of it would work. Just a person showing up alone to do the unglamorous work that nobody was watching, because they understood something you're only starting to understand right now. The ones who wait for company before they commit never build anything real. The ones who commit alone and let the company arrive later, if it arrives at all, are the only ones who ever actually finish. And there's another layer to this that almost nobody talks about, because it's uncomfortable in a different way. You've probably been telling yourself a story where the absence of support is the reason you haven't moved. But look closer. How much of the waiting was really about needing them? And how much of it was about needing an audience before you'd risk looking foolish? Because that's the quieter fear underneath all of this. It's not just that you want help. It's that doing this alone means if you fail in full view of yourself, with no crowd to soften it, no team to share the blame with, no story where "we tried" replaces "I tried and it wasn't enough." Alone, there's nowhere to put that, and some part of you has known that for a long time, which is exactly why you kept waiting for company before you'd commit to the risk. Consider, too, what it actually costs you to keep outsourcing your motivation to other people's belief in you. Every time you needed someone else's enthusiasm to keep going, you were building your resolve on a foundation you didn't control. Their energy dips, yours dips with it. Their doubt creeps in, yours multiplies it. You've spent years, maybe without naming it this way, tying the strength of your own commitment to the fluctuating commitment of people who were never going to carry this the way you do, because it was never theirs to carry. That's not a partnership. That's dependency wearing the mask of collaboration. And dependency, no matter how well-intentioned the people around you are, will always leave you exactly as fragile as the last person who stopped showing up. Here's what almost no one tells you about doing it alone. It isn't a punishment. It isn't the consolation prize you settle for when nobody else believes in you enough. It's the actual mechanism by which conviction gets built in the first place. You don't discover what you're made of by being carried. You discover it in the exact moment where carrying yourself is the only option left, where quitting would be easy and invisible and nobody would even know, and you do the work anyway. That moment, repeated enough times, is where a man stops being someone who needs an audience to perform discipline for, and starts being someone who simply has it, because he's proven it to himself in rooms where no one else was watching. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely, and until you understand that difference clearly, this entire idea is going to feel like a punishment instead of what it actually is, a path to becoming someone unshakable. Loneliness is the ache of wanting connection and not having it. Being alone, in the sense we're talking about here, is something else entirely. It's a chosen posture. It's standing fully in your own responsibility. Not because nobody loves you, not because you're incapable of connection, but because you finally understood that the specific work of building your life cannot be delegated, no matter how many people are standing nearby. You can be surrounded by people who care about you deeply and still be the only one who can do this particular work. That's not a tragedy. That's just how it's always worked for anyone who ever built something that mattered. So let's talk about how you actually carry this day after day without breaking under the weight of doing it alone. The first thing you need is a complete shift in how you measure progress. As long as you're waiting for external validation to tell you whether you're on the right track, you're going to be paralyzed every time that validation doesn't show up on schedule. You need to build instead an internal compass, one that doesn't require anyone else's approval to function. That means learning to ask yourself honestly whether today's effort moved you closer to what you're building, regardless of whether a single other person noticed, congratulated you, or even knew it happened. That question, asked consistently, is what starts replacing your dependency on outside encouragement with something far more durable: trust in your own judgment. You also need to accept something that's going to feel counterintuitive at first. The isolation of doing this alone is temporary, but only if you use it correctly. Nobody builds forever in total silence. What you're doing right now, in this stretch where it's just you showing up without applause, without a team, without proof that any of it is going to work, is laying down evidence. Not for anyone else, for yourself. Every day you show up when nobody's watching is a deposit into a kind of account that only you can see the balance of. And that account is exactly what you're going to draw from later. When the doubt gets loud, when the exhaustion sets in, when quitting would be the easiest and most understandable thing in the world. In those moments, you're not going to need someone else's belief in you. You're going to need your own record, the one you've been quietly building this entire time. That proves you don't fold just because no one's holding you up. I want to talk about the specific mechanics of how this responsibility should actually change your daily behavior, because understanding the philosophy without changing the practice leaves you exactly where you started. Doing it alone means you stop waiting for the conditions to feel supportive before you act. You do the work today, in whatever emotional state you're actually in, without a team meeting to hype you up first, without someone checking in to make sure you followed through. It means your commitment has to be strong enough to survive complete silence, because complete silence is going to be the environment you operate in more often than you'd like. And building a commitment that can survive silence is fundamentally different from building one that needs noise to stay alive. The second kind collapses the moment the noise stops. The first kind was never dependent on it to begin with. There's also a practical discipline you need to install here. Stop measuring your solitude against some imagined version of success where a team appears right on schedule to validate your effort. That imagined timeline is fiction, and holding yourself to it only manufactures suffering that doesn't need to exist. The real timeline, the one that actually happens for people who build something lasting, usually includes a much longer stretch of invisible, unaccompanied effort than anyone tells you about publicly. Success stories get compressed after the fact into narratives that skip the years of silence, because silence doesn't make for a compelling highlight. But that silence is where almost everything of substance actually gets built. Expecting it to be short, or expecting company to arrive quickly, sets you up to interpret a completely normal stretch of solitary work as evidence that something's wrong, when it's actually evidence that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And finally, I want you to understand what's waiting on the other side of this, because doing it alone isn't a life sentence of isolation. It's a proving ground. The version of you that comes out the other side of a real stretch of solitary, unsupported effort is fundamentally different from the version that went in. He doesn't need the room to believe in him before he acts. He doesn't need permission, doesn't need a partner to split the risk with, doesn't need an audience to hold him accountable, because he already held himself accountable when it counted most and nobody else was there to see it. That man attracts the right people eventually, not because he went looking for them, but because conviction built in solitude has a weight to it that other people can feel, even if they can't explain why. So do it alone, not because you have to stay that way forever, but because this exact chapter, the one you're in right now, was never going to be finished by anyone but you. It's on you. It was always on you. And the sooner you stop waiting for that to change, the sooner you actually start building something real.